The desert sun beat down on the small, unassuming workshop, baking the corrugated iron roof until it hummed. Inside, John Cutter, a man built more like a brick outhouse than a watchmaker, meticulously cleaned the gears of an antique pocket watch. His movements were precise, almost delicate, a stark contrast to the raw power evident in his thick forearms and the network of scars that crisscrossed them. That he wore simple, faded denim jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, clothes that blended into the dusty landscape. His face, etched with lines earned through hardship, was partially obscured by a baseball cap pulled low. That he wasn't a watchmaker. Not really. It was a facade, a way to occupy his time and hopefully quiet the relentless echoes of the past. The rhythmic ticking of the watches, the intricate dance of their inner workings, provided a temporary anesthetic against the memories that clawed at the edges of his consciousness. He'd chosen this isolated existence deliberately, a self-imposed exile. Far removed from the world he once knew. A fly buzzed lazily around the workbench, breaking the silence. Cutter swatted it away with a practiced hand, his gaze momentarily drifting to a faded photograph tucked into the corner of the bench. It showed a younger Cutter, clean-shaven and radiating confidence, surrounded by a team of soldiers. Their faces were blurred, almost indistinguishable, but the camaraderie was palpable. He quickly averted his eyes, a flicker of pain crossing his features. That life, that brotherhood, was gone, shattered by a single, catastrophic mission. The mission, the word was a phantom limb, a constant ache that throbbed with regret and guilt. He hadn't spoken about it in years, burying it deep within the recesses of his mind. But it was always there, a dark shadow lurking just beneath the surface. He saw their faces in his dreams, heard their screams in the wind. That he'd made a choice, a split-second decision that had cost them everything. That he told himself he'd done the best he could, that there was no other way. But the doubt lingered, a persistent poison that corroded his soul. The bell above the workshop door jingled, announcing a visitor. Cutter tensed, his senses immediately on high alert. He hadn't had a customer in weeks. He slipped a wrench under the workbench, his movements fluid and silent, a testament to years of training. A woman entered, her face etched with worry. She looked out of place in this desolate setting, her expensive clothes and manicured nails a stark contrast to the rough surroundings. She scanned the room, her eyes finally settling on Cutter. "Mr. Cutter?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I need your help." Cutter hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to turn her away. He wanted nothing to do with the outside world, with its complications and dangers. But there was something in her eyes, a desperate plea that resonated with a part of him he thought he had buried long ago. A part of him that still believed in doing the right thing, even when it came at a cost. He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. The quiet life was over. The past had come calling. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, the iron horse, a gleaming steel serpent of a train, hissed and shuddered as it prepared for its journey. The morning sun glinted off its polished carriages, reflecting the bustling activity of the platform. Passengers, a microcosm of society, hurried to board, their faces a mixture of anticipation and weariness. Families with excited children, businessmen clutching briefcases, elderly couples embarking on a long-awaited vacation. All were united by the common destination at the end of the tracks. Among the throng was Senator Thomas Thompson, a man whose presence commanded attention even in a crowd. Tall and impeccably dressed, he exuded an air of authority and quiet power. He was a seasoned politician, known for his unwavering principles and his dedication to public service. But today, his focus was not on policy or political maneuvering. His attention was solely on his daughter, Emily, a bright and energetic 10-year-old with a mischievous glint in her eyes. Emily skipped ahead, her pigtails bouncing, eager to explore the train. Thompson smiled indulgently, his heart swelling with love for his daughter. He cherished these moments, away from the pressures of Washington, where he could simply be a father. He knew his demanding career often took him away from her, and he made every effort to make up for lost time. This train journey was supposed to be a special occasion, a chance for them to reconnect and create lasting memories. That as they boarded the train, Thompson couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. He dismissed it as the usual anxieties of a protective parent, amplified by the high-profile nature of his position. He was accustomed to security details and precautions, but he preferred to travel without them whenever possible, wanting Emily to experience a sense of normalcy. Inside the luxurious carriage, the atmosphere was one of relaxed anticipation. The train pulled away from the station with a gentle lurch, gradually gathering speed as it sliced through the countryside. The landscape transformed into a blur of green fields and distant mountains, a soothing backdrop to the rhythmic clatter of the wheels. On the tracks, unbeknownst to the passengers, however, their idyllic journey was about to be shattered. Several seemingly ordinary travelers were, in fact, highly trained mercenaries, strategically positioned throughout the train. They blended seamlessly into the crowd, their faces betraying no hint of their true intentions. They were waiting for the signal, the moment to unleash their meticulously planned operation. Their leader, Viktor Volkov, watched from a discreet corner, his eyes cold and calculating. He was a man of few words, his presence radiating an aura of menace. He had spent months meticulously planning this operation, anticipating every possible contingency. He was driven by a burning desire for revenge, a vendetta that had consumed his life for years. Senator Thompson was merely a pawn in his elaborate game, a means to an end. The Iron Horse was about to become a battleground, and the lives of everyone on board were hanging in the balance. The seemingly ordinary train journey was about to transform into a desperate fight for survival. The tranquility of the Iron Horse shattered with brutal efficiency a prearranged signal, a short, sharp burst of static over the train's public address system unleashed chaos. The seemingly ordinary passengers transformed in an instant. Jackets were ripped open to reveal concealed weapons, practiced hands drawing silenced pistols and compact submachine guns. Viktor Volkov, his face a mask of cold determination, moved swiftly through the carriage, his presence radiating authority. His men, disciplined and ruthless, followed his lead, securing each section of the train with practiced precision. Passengers screamed and scrambled for cover, their initial confusion quickly giving way to terror. The mercenaries worked with chilling coordination. Some neutralized the train's security personnel, while others focused on herding passengers into the main dining car. Volkov himself led a small team towards Senator Thompson's compartment. The senator, alerted by the commotion, instinctively shielded Emily. His face grimmed. He knew this was no random act of violence. The door to their compartment burst open, and Volkov stepped inside, his eyes locking onto Thompson. "Senator," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "your journey ends here." Thompson stood his ground, his protective arms still around Emily. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. "You," Volkov replied simply. "You are going to help me get what I want." He gestured to his men, who moved forward to seize Thompson. Emily cried out, clinging to her father. Thompson struggled against his captors, but he was no match for their superior strength and training. He knew resisting would only put Emily in greater danger. "Don't hurt her," Thompson pleaded, his voice laced with desperation. "Please, leave her out of this." Volkov smirked coldly. "Your concern for your daughter is touching, Senator, but she is also a valuable asset. Her safety depends entirely on your cooperation." With Thompson secured, Volkov's men moved Emily to join the other passengers in the dining car. The scene inside was one of utter pandemonium. Men, women, and children huddled together, their faces pale with fear. Some wept silently, while others prayed aloud. The air was thick with tension and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Volkov addressed the passengers, his voice amplified by a portable megaphone. "Silence," he barked, his words cutting through the terrified murmurs. "You will all remain calm and follow my instructions. Any attempt to resist will be met with swift and brutal force. Your lives depend on it." He then outlined his demands: a substantial ransom and the release of several high-profile criminals from government custody. He made it clear that Senator Thompson's life hung in the balance, and that any delay or interference would have dire consequences. To emphasize his point, he fired a single shot into the ceiling, the deafening blast sending a fresh wave of terror through the crowd. The Iron Horse, once a symbol of comfortable travel, had become a prison on wheels, hurtling towards an uncertain future. And somewhere on that train, John Cutter remained hidden, watching, assessing, and preparing to strike back. The game had begun. The woman's plea still echoed in Cutter's mind as he boarded the Iron Horse, a last-minute decision spurred by a need to understand the situation before committing himself. He chose a seat in a sparsely populated carriage towards the rear of the train, keeping a low profile that he wore nondescript clothing, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap, the same one he wore in his workshop. He blended in, becoming just another face in the crowd. He was in the observation car, supposedly enjoying the scenery, sipping lukewarm coffee and reading a tattered paperback. But his eyes missed nothing. The way the conductor moved, the chatter of the passengers, the subtle shifts in the train's rhythm. He absorbed it all, his senses honed by years of training. The burst of static, the prearranged signal, ripped through the air, jolting Cutter from his observation. His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. He recognized the sound for what it was. The opening salvo of a coordinated attack. He saw the ordinary passengers transform, the glint of metal as weapons were drawn. Panic erupted around him. Passengers screamed and scrambled for cover, their faces contorted with fear. Cutter remained seated, his expression betraying nothing. That he didn't flinch, didn't cry out, didn't even blink. He was a statue in a sea of chaos. His mind raced, analyzing the situation with cold precision. That he assessed the number of attackers, their positions, their weaponry, their tactics. He noted the exits, the potential escape routes, the structural weaknesses of the carriage. He calculated the odds, weighed the risks, and formulated a plan. His first instinct was to act, to intervene, to protect the innocent. But he resisted the urge. He knew that a premature intervention would be suicidal. He needed information. He needed a plan. He needed to understand the enemy. That he made a calculated decision, to stay hidden, to observe, to gather intelligence. He leaned back in his seat, feigning indifference, as the mercenaries swept through the carriage, herding passengers towards the dining car. He watched them, studying their movements, their communication protocols, their vulnerabilities. He saw Volkov, the leader, a man who radiated an aura of cold, calculating menace. Cutter recognized the look in his eyes, the look of a seasoned killer, a man driven by something more than just money. That he knew that Volkov was the key, the linchpin of the entire operation. That the mercenaries moved him and the remaining passengers towards the dining car. Cutter made a point of stumbling. Feigning clumsiness, he used the opportunity to discreetly scan the floor, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. That he found a discarded metal letter opener, small but potentially lethal. He slipped it into his pocket. Unnoticed, he was now among the hostages, a seemingly helpless victim. But beneath the surface, he was a predator in waiting, a coiled spring ready to unleash its fury. He was John Cutter, and he was about to turn the Iron Horse into a living hell for Viktor Volkov and his men. The observation was over. The assessment was complete. The time for action was fast approaching. Inside the crowded dining car, the atmosphere was suffocating, thick with fear and desperation. Volkov, standing on a makeshift platform constructed from overturned tables, addressed the hostages once more, his voice amplified by the megaphone. His words were precise, chillingly calm, each syllable carefully chosen to maximize their impact. As you are now aware, he began, his gaze sweeping across the terrified faces, Senator Thompson is our guest. His well-being, and indeed your own, depends entirely on the cooperation of the authorities. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Our demands are simple. We require a substantial ransom, $100 million in unmarked, non-sequential bills. Furthermore, we demand the immediate release of 12 high-profile individuals currently incarcerated in various federal prisons across the country. Their names and locations have been transmitted to the appropriate channels. A collective gasp rippled through the hostages. The demands were audacious, almost impossible. The likelihood of the government complying seemed slim. Volkov continued, his voice hardening. Let me be perfectly clear that we are not making idle threats. That we have planted strategically placed explosives along the railway tracks ahead of this train. Should our demands not be met within the specified time frame, precisely 4 hours from now, those explosives will be detonated. This train, and everyone on board, will be reduced to nothing more than twisted metal and shattered dreams. He held up a small detonator, its red light blinking ominously. This is not a negotiation. This is a demand. Your government has 4 hours to decide whether they value Senator Thompson's life, and indeed your own, enough to comply. To further underscore his threat, Volkov ordered one of his men to bring forward a laptop. The screen flickered to life, displaying a live feed from a camera positioned on a railway bridge several miles ahead. Beneath the bridge, clearly visible, were several packages wrapped in duct tape, their wires snaking towards a central detonator. The hostages stared at the screen in horror, the reality of their situation sinking in. They were trapped, their lives hanging by a thread, at the mercy of a ruthless and unpredictable man. As Volkov outlined his plan, Cutter remained impassive. Observing him with a critical eye, he noted the confidence in Volkov's voice, the meticulousness of his planning, the ruthlessness of his execution. That he knew that Volkov was not bluffing. He was prepared to carry out his threats, regardless of the consequences. The explosives were a game-changer. Cutter knew that he couldn't simply overpower the mercenaries and free the hostages. He had to find a way to disarm the explosives, to prevent Volkov from detonating them. But how? He had no expertise in bomb disposal, no tools, no resources. He glanced around the dining car, his eyes scanning the faces of the hostages. He saw fear, despair, and resignation. But he also saw something else, a flicker of hope, a spark of defiance. He knew that he couldn't do this alone, that he needed their help. He needed to find a way to inspire them, to rally them, to turn them from victims into fighters. But first, he needed to get closer. To Volkov, he needed to find a way to disrupt his plans, to sow seeds of doubt and confusion. He needed to find a weakness, a chink in his armor. The game had become even more dangerous, the stakes even higher. The clock was ticking. The fear in the dining car was palpable, a heavy blanket stifling any hope. But Cutter saw beyond the fear. Recognizing the potential for resistance, he knew he couldn't directly confront Volkov, yet that he needed to thin the ranks, to create opportunities, to instill a sense of hope before attempting a direct assault. His counteroffensive began subtly. He started by observing the guards posted around the perimeter of the dining car. He noted their routines, their blind spots, their communication patterns. He identified the weakest links, the ones who were less attentive, less disciplined. His first target was a young mercenary positioned near the rear exit of the dining car, a nervous kid who kept glancing towards the back of the train. Cutter noticed he favored his left side, a slight limp suggesting a possible injury. Cutter feigned a coughing fit, drawing the attention of the guard. As the guard approached, Cutter deliberately bumped into a nearby table, sending a tray of dishes crashing to the floor. The sudden noise startled the guard, momentarily distracting him. In that split second, Cutter moved. He used the chaos as cover, swiftly closing the distance between himself and the guard. He used the metal letter opener he had retrieved earlier, his movements precise and deadly. The guard never saw it coming. The letter opener found its mark, piercing the guard's carotid artery. He slumped to the floor, silently, unnoticed amidst the ongoing chaos. Cutter quickly dragged the body behind an overturned table, concealing it from viewpoint. One down, several to go. He moved on to his next target, a burly mercenary guarding the front entrance to the dining car. This one was more experienced, more alert. Cutter knew he couldn't use the same tactic. He needed a different approach. He noticed a group of children huddled near the front of the car, their faces pale with fear. He approached them cautiously, speaking in a soft, reassuring voice. He told them that everything was going to be all right, that he was going to help them. He asked them to do something for him, a small task that would help him save everyone. He pointed to a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall near the guard. He told them to distract the guard, to create a diversion. The children, trusting Cutter implicitly, did as they were told. They started crying, screaming, and tugging at the guard's leg. The guard, annoyed and frustrated, tried to shoo them away. As the guard was distracted, Cutter moved. He grabbed a heavy serving platter from a nearby table and hurled it at the guard's head. The platter struck its target with a sickening thud, knocking the guard unconscious. He quickly secured the guard's weapon, a silenced pistol, and dragged him behind another overturned table. Point 2. Down, he continued his methodical elimination of the outer perimeter guards, using his tactical skills and knowledge of close-quarters combat to his advantage. He used improvised weapons, exploited weaknesses, and capitalized on distractions. With each guard he eliminated, a small flicker of hope ignited within the hostages. They saw that someone was fighting back, that there was a chance of survival. Cutter's actions were inspiring them, turning them from victims into potential allies. But he knew that this was just the beginning, that he had only thinned the ranks. The real battle was yet to come, that he still had to confront Volkov, disarm the explosives, and secure the train. The clock was ticking, and the stakes were higher than ever. The subtle shift in atmosphere within the dining car was noticeable. The initial despair was slowly giving way to a quiet determination, fueled by Cutter's actions. But he knew he needed more than just fleeting hope, that he needed a catalyst, something to solidify their resolve and transform them into a unified force. As he was strategizing his next move, a small figure emerged from the huddled mass of hostages. It was Emily, Senator Thompson's daughter. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes wide with fear, but there was also a flicker of courage in her gaze. She moved cautiously through the crowded car, avoiding the mercenaries, her small frame weaving between the overturned tables and terrified passengers. She had seen Cutter's actions, witnessed his quiet heroism, and she instinctively knew that he was her only hope. She reached Cutter, her small hand tentatively tugging at his sleeve. He turned, his face softening slightly as he looked down at her. He saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the desperate plea for help. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You have to help my daddy. They took him away. I don't know where he is." Cutter hesitated. He had always worked alone, relying on his own skills and instincts. Involving a child, especially in this situation, was a risk he wasn't sure he was willing to take. His past, the mission gone wrong, flashed before his eyes. He couldn't bear the thought of failing again, of putting another innocent life in danger. He knelt down, bringing himself to her level. "Where is your father?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. "I don't know," she sobbed. "They took him to the front of the train. I tried to follow, but they wouldn't let me." Cutter looked at her, really looked at her. He saw not just a frightened child, but a resilient young girl who was desperate to save her father. He saw a reflection of his own lost innocence, a reminder of the values he had almost forgotten. That he remembered the woman in his workshop, the plea in her eyes. He remembered his own sense of duty, the oath he had sworn to protect the innocent. He couldn't turn his back on Emily. He couldn't let her down. He took a deep breath, pushing aside his doubts and fears. He made a decision. "Okay, Emily," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "I promise you, I will do everything I can to save your father." A small smile flickered across her face, her eyes shining with hope. "Really?" she asked. "Really," Cutter replied, his voice firm. "But I need your help. I need you to be brave, to be strong. Can you do that for me?" Emily nodded, her small chin lifting defiantly. "I can be brave," she said. "I can be strong." Cutter smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. That he had found his catalyst. He had found his reason to fight. He had found his purpose. He knew that protecting Emily would complicate things, would increase the risks. But he also knew that it was the right thing to do. He couldn't stand idly by while innocent people were being threatened. That he had to act. And he had to act now. That he stood up, his gaze sweeping across the hostages. He saw their faces, their expressions of hope and determination. He knew that he wasn't alone. That he had an army of ordinary people who were ready to fight for their survival. He looked down at Emily, his eyes filled with resolve. "Let's go," he said. "It's time to save your father." With Emily holding tightly to his hand, Cutter began his ascent towards the front of the train, each step a calculated risk. He knew that the element of surprise was dwindling. Volkov would soon realize that something was amiss. He had to move quickly, decisively. The first obstacle was a heavily guarded connecting corridor between the dining car and the next carriage. Cutter couldn't risk a direct assault. He needed a diversion. He turned to Emily. "Remember what I said about being brave?" he whispered. She nodded, her eyes fixed on his. "I need you to create a distraction. Can you do that?" He explained his plan, a risky maneuver that required perfect timing and a significant amount of courage. Emily listened intently, her face determined. Taking a deep breath, Emily darted forward, deliberately tripping and falling directly in front of the guards. She started crying, her small voice filled with distress. "I hurt myself. I need my mommy." The guards, momentarily taken aback, rushed to her aid. Cutter used the distraction to his advantage. He swiftly moved to the side of the corridor, concealing himself behind a luggage rack as the guards were focused on Emily. Cutter launched his attack. He used his silenced pistol, firing 2 quick shots, each finding its mark. The guards fell, silently, their bodies collapsing to the floor. He quickly retrieved their weapons, an MP5 submachine gun and a pump-action shotgun. Adding them to his arsenal, he handed the shotgun to a burly passenger who had shown a willingness to fight. "Can you use this?" he asked. The passenger nodded grimly. "I used to hunt," he replied. Cutter turned to Emily, his face filled with pride. "You were amazing," he said. "Thank you." They moved on, cautiously advancing through the train. Each carriage presented a new challenge, a new obstacle. Cutter used his knowledge of close-quarters combat and his tactical skills to his advantage, utilizing the environment to create opportunities. In the next carriage, he encountered a group of mercenaries playing cards that he used a smoke grenade, disorienting them and allowing him to take them down in a flurry of fists and kicks. In the luggage car, he used the train's own momentum to his advantage, sending luggage flying at the mercenaries, creating chaos and confusion. With each encounter, the opposition became more difficult, the mercenaries more skilled. Volkov was clearly aware of Cutter's progress, and he was sending his best men to stop him. Cutter faced them head-on, his movements fluid and deadly. He used his environment to his advantage, turning the train into his own personal battlefield. He leaped over seats, crawled through luggage racks, and swung from overhead handrails, his agility defying gravity. The train became a blur of motion, a symphony of violence. Gunshots echoed through the carriages, punctuated by the screams of the hostages and the grunts of the mercenaries. Cutter was a force of nature, a whirlwind of destruction, tearing through the train, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Despite the increasing difficulty, Cutter pressed on, driven by his promise to Emily and his determination to stop Volkov. He was running out of time. He knew that Volkov was growing increasingly desperate, and that he would soon resort to drastic measures. The final confrontation was inevitable. Cutter could feel it in his bones. He was ready. He had come too far to turn back now. He was going to save Senator Thompson, disarm the explosives, and bring Volkov to justice, no matter the cost. The relentless action on the train triggered a series of vivid flashbacks, shards of memory that pierced through Cutter's carefully constructed defenses. The present fight for survival was inextricably linked to the ghosts of his past, each brutal encounter on the Iron Horse echoing a similar moment from the mission that had shattered his life. The first flashback hit him as he disarmed a mercenary with a swift knife strike to the throat. He was instantly transported back to a humid jungle, his younger self executing the same move on an enemy soldier. The memory was sharp, visceral, the smell of gunpowder and sweat filling his nostrils. He saw the face of his comrade, Miller, watching him with a mixture of admiration and concern. Miller, who wouldn't make it home. The flashback revealed the core of Cutter's skill set, his speed, his precision, his ruthless efficiency. He was a master of close-quarters combat, a lethal weapon honed to perfection. But it also revealed the toll that this skill had taken on him, the emotional detachment that allowed him to kill without hesitation. Another flashback occurred as he directed Emily to safety during a particularly intense firefight. He saw another young girl, Sarah, the daughter of a local informant, caught in the crossfire during his past mission. That he remembered the fear in her eyes, the desperate plea for help. He remembered the agonizing decision he had to make, the choice between completing the mission and saving her life. This flashback revealed the source of Cutter's reluctance to get involved. He carried the weight of Sarah's death on his shoulders, the guilt of failing to protect her. He feared that history would repeat itself, that he would be forced to make another impossible choice, another sacrifice. The third flashback surfaced as he confronted a mercenary who reminded him of his former commanding officer, a man named Colonel Davies. Davies had been a father figure to Cutter, a mentor who had taught him everything he knew. But Davies had also been a ruthless pragmatist, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to achieve his objectives. The flashback revealed the conflict at the heart of Cutter's character, the tension between his loyalty to his comrades and his own moral compass. He had always admired Davies' strength and leadership, but he had also questioned his methods, The mission had forced him to confront this conflict head-on, ultimately leading to a devastating betrayal. These flashbacks were not merely historical footnotes. They were integral to understanding Cutter's motivations, his fears, his strengths, and his weaknesses. They explained why he had chosen to live in isolation, why he was so reluctant to get involved, and why he was now so determined to protect Emily. Each flashback served as a reminder of the cost of war, the human toll of violence. They reinforced his commitment to ending the hijacking, to saving the lives of the innocent passengers on the train. That he couldn't change the past, but he could shape the future. He could prevent another tragedy from happening. The flashbacks were a burden, a constant reminder of his failures, but they were also a source of strength, a driving force that propelled him forward. He would not let the ghosts of his past define him. He would use his skills, his experience, and his resolve to make a difference, to protect the innocent, and to finally find redemption. As Cutter fought his way towards the engine, he knew he couldn't rely solely on his own skills and the help of the hostages. He needed external support, reinforcements, a way to alert the authorities to the dire situation unfolding on the Iron Horse. He remembered seeing a satellite phone in the train's communications room, located near the front of the train. It was a long shot, but it was his only hope of reaching the outside world. He entrusted Emily to the care of the burly passenger with the shotgun, instructing him to keep her safe. He promised her he would be back soon. He moved quickly and silently, using his knowledge of the train's layout to avoid detection. He reached the communications room, its door locked and guarded by two mercenaries. He couldn't risk a prolonged firefight. He needed to be quick, decisive. He used a small explosive charge, salvaged from a damaged piece of luggage, to blow the door open. Catching the mercenaries by surprise, he stormed into the room, his silenced pistol blazing. The mercenaries barely had time to react before they were cut down, their bodies collapsing to the floor. Cutter quickly located the satellite phone and powered it on. He dialed an emergency number, his fingers flying across the keypad. The phone rang, each ring a lifeline to the outside world. Finally, someone answered. Cutter spoke quickly, his voice urgent, relaying the details of the hijacking, Volkov's demands, and the location of the train. He stressed the importance of disarming the explosives, emphasizing the imminent danger. The person on the other end of the line promised to alert the authorities immediately. Cutter felt a surge of relief. He had done it. He had managed to reach the outside world. But his relief was short-lived. As he was about to disconnect the call, the signal suddenly cut out. The phone went dead. Cutter cursed under his breath. He knew what had happened. Volkov had anticipated this possibility and had activated a jamming device, effectively cutting off all communications from the train. The jamming device was a sophisticated piece of equipment capable of blocking all radio frequencies, including satellite signals. It was clear that Volkov was prepared for anything. Cutter slammed the phone down in frustration. He was back to square one. He was alone, trapped on a speeding train with a group of ruthless mercenaries and a ticking time bomb. The pressure was mounting. The clock was ticking. He had to find a way to stop Volkov, to disarm the explosives, to save the lives of the passengers on the train. And he had to do it alone. He left the communications room, his face grim. He knew that Volkov would be expecting him. He knew that the final confrontation was inevitable. He returned to Emily, his heart heavy with worry. He couldn't tell her what had happened. He didn't want to scare her. He just wanted to keep her safe. He looked into her eyes, his voice filled with resolve. "It's time," he said. "It's time to end this." With communications severed, the train became a pressure cooker. Cutter knew that Volkov would be actively searching for him, anticipating his next move. The dynamic shifted from a calculated assault to a tense cat-and-mouse game, each trying to outthink and outmaneuver the other. Volkov, realizing the threat Cutter posed, doubled the security around Senator Thompson and the explosives detonator. He moved Thompson to the engine room, the most heavily fortified location on the train. He also started systematically searching each carriage, terrorizing the hostages in his desperate attempt to flush out Cutter. Cutter, with Emily always close by, used the train's labyrinthine interior to his advantage. He moved through the shadows, utilizing hidden compartments, maintenance tunnels, and even the train's undercarriage to evade detection. He became a ghost, a phantom presence that haunted Volkov and his men. He left subtle clues to taunt Volkov, small acts of defiance that chipped away at his composure. He disabled surveillance cameras, sabotaged equipment, and left cryptic messages scrawled on the walls, reminders that he was always watching, always planning. Volkov, initially confident in his control of the situation, grew increasingly frustrated by Cutter's resistance. The carefully planned operation was unraveling, his authority undermined by a single man. The meticulous facade of calm began to crack, revealing the ruthless and desperate man beneath. His frustration manifested in increasingly brutal tactics. He started executing hostages, randomly selecting victims to send a message to Cutter. Each death weighed heavily on Cutter, fueling his determination to stop Volkov at any cost. He used the train's PA system to broadcast threats, promising to detonate the explosives if Cutter didn't surrender. He played psychological games, trying to break Cutter's spirit, to force him into making a mistake. Cutter refused to be intimidated. He knew that surrendering would only guarantee the deaths of everyone on board. He had to stay strong, to keep fighting. To find a way to turn the tables on Volkov, that he used the PA system himself, broadcasting messages of hope and defiance to the hostages. He reminded them that they were not victims, that they were capable of fighting back. He urged them to resist, to sabotage the mercenaries, to create opportunities for him to strike. The hostages, inspired by Cutter's courage, began to fight back in small but significant ways. They sabotaged equipment, distracted the guards, and provided Cutter with information about Volkov's movements. The train became a battleground, a theater of war where every inch of territory was fiercely contested. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. The final confrontation was inevitable. Volkov, desperate and enraged, raised the stakes. He announced that he would detonate the explosives in 1 hour, regardless of whether his demands were met. He was no longer interested in the ransom or the prisoner release. His sole objective was to destroy Cutter, to erase his defiance, to reclaim control. The clock was ticking. Cutter had 1 hour to stop Volkov, to disarm the explosives, and to save the lives of everyone on board. The game was about to reach its deadly conclusion. The execution of the hostages had a chilling effect on everyone, including Cutter. He knew that Volkov was no longer driven by logic or reason. He was operating solely on emotion, fueled by a deep-seated rage that threatened to consume him and everyone on board the train. Cutter needed to understand what was driving Volkov, to find a way to exploit his weakness, to turn his anger against him. That he couldn't just rely on brute force. He needed information. That he used the chaos created by the hostage executions to his advantage. He slipped away from Emily, entrusting her to the care of the burly passenger once again. That he moved towards the engine room, knowing that Volkov would be expecting him. He didn't intend to confront Volkov directly. That he needed to gather intelligence, to understand his motivations. That he needed to find a way to break through his carefully constructed defenses. That he used his stealth skills to infiltrate the engine room, avoiding the heavily armed guards. That he moved through the shadows, his movements fluid and silent. He found Senator Thompson chained to a piece of machinery, his face bruised and bloodied. He was guarded by 2 mercenaries, their eyes cold and watchful. Cutter couldn't risk a direct assault. He needed to be subtle, to gather information without alerting the guards. He used a small listening device, salvaged from the communications room, to eavesdrop on their conversation. The guards were discussing Volkov, his increasingly erratic behavior, his obsession with Senator Thompson. They revealed snippets of information, fragments of a hidden past. Cutter pieced together the puzzle, the pieces falling into place with horrifying clarity. He discovered Volkov's true motive. Revenge, the ransom, and the prisoner release were merely a smokescreen, a way to mask his true intentions. That Volkov's family had been destroyed by Senator Thompson's actions years ago. Thompson, as a young prosecutor, had been instrumental in convicting Volkov's father, a powerful crime boss. That Volkov's father had died in prison, leaving his family destitute and vulnerable. Volkov blamed Thompson for everything that had happened. He had spent years plotting his revenge, waiting for the opportunity to strike. The hijacking of the Iron Horse was not about money or power. It was about settling a score, about making Thompson pay for his past actions. Cutter understood now. That he understood the depth of Volkov's rage, the intensity of his hatred. He knew that he was dealing with a man who had nothing to lose, a man who was willing to sacrifice everything to achieve his goal. He also realized that he could use this information to his advantage. He could exploit Volkov's anger, turn his desire for revenge against him. He just needed to find the right way to do it. He left the engine room, his mind racing. He had a new understanding of the situation, a new perspective on the enemy. He was no longer just fighting to save the hostages. He was fighting to stop a man consumed by revenge, a man who was willing to destroy everything in his path. That he returned to Emily, his face grim. He couldn't tell her the truth about Volkov's motives. He didn't want to burden her with that knowledge. He just wanted to keep her safe. He looked into her eyes, his voice filled with resolve. "It's time," he said. "It's time to end this, for good." The final hour had begun. The train hurtled through the countryside, a steel coffin speeding towards an unknown fate. Cutter, with Emily safely hidden away, made his way to the engine room. Prepared to face Volkov, he moved with a quiet resolve, his face etched with determination. He had a plan, a risky maneuver that required perfect timing and unwavering focus. He knew that this was it. The moment of truth. He reached the engine room, the door heavily guarded. He didn't attempt to breach the door directly. Instead, he used his knowledge of the train's mechanics to bypass the guards. He climbed onto the roof of the train, moving precariously along the speeding carriages. The wind whipped around him, threatening to throw him off balance. The train swayed violently, making his task even more difficult. He ignored the danger, focusing on his objective. That he reached the engine room, carefully lowering himself onto the roof. That he used a cutting torch, salvaged from the luggage car, to create a hole in the roof. Directly above Volkov, he peered through the hole, assessing the situation. Volkov was standing beside Senator Thompson, his hand resting on the detonator. His eyes were filled with a manic intensity, a burning desire for revenge. Cutter knew that he had to act quickly. He couldn't afford to hesitate. He dropped a smoke grenade into the engine room, filling the space with a thick cloud of smoke. The guards panicked, their vision obscured. Volkov cursed, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. Cutter used the confusion to his advantage. He dropped into the engine room, landing directly behind Volkov. That he grabbed him from behind, his arm locking around his throat. Volkov struggled, his body convulsing. He tried to break free, but Cutter's grip was too strong. That he squeezed tighter, cutting off Volkov's air supply. The fight was brutal, a desperate struggle for survival. They crashed into machinery, their bodies slamming against the walls. The train swayed violently, adding to the chaos. Volkov managed to break free, his face contorted with rage. He lunged at Cutter, his knife flashing. Cutter dodged the attack, his movements fluid and precise. That he grabbed Volkov's wrist, twisting it violently. The knife fell to the floor. They grappled, their bodies locked together in a deadly embrace. Cutter used his superior strength and training to his advantage. Overpowering Volkov, he slammed Volkov against a piece of machinery, knocking the wind out of him. He then delivered a series of swift, powerful blows to Volkov's face, his fists connecting with bone and flesh. Volkov collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Cutter quickly secured him, tying him up with ropes salvaged from the engine room. He then turned his attention to the detonator. He knew nothing about explosives. He had no idea how to disarm it, but he had to try. He examined the detonator carefully, his mind racing. He saw a series of wires, each connected to a different component. He had to guess which wire to cut. He took a deep breath, steeling his nerves. He clipped one of the wires. The detonator remained silent. He clipped another wire. Still nothing. He clipped the final wire. The red light on the detonator went out. The device was disarmed. Cutter let out a sigh of relief. He had done it. He had stopped Volkov, disarmed the explosives, and saved the lives of everyone on board the train. But the fight was not over. He still had to secure the train. To ensure that all of Volkov's men were apprehended, he still had a lot of work to do. With Volkov defeated and the explosives disarmed, Cutter turned his attention to securing the train. That he knew that there were still several mercenaries at large, and he couldn't risk leaving the hostages vulnerable. He quickly freed Senator Thompson, who was grateful but shaken. He instructed him to stay in the engine room and to help him secure the perimeter. Together, they moved through the train, systematically apprehending the remaining mercenaries. The hostages, inspired by Cutter's courage and leadership, assisted in the effort, disarming the mercenaries and restraining them. The burly passenger with the shotgun proved to be a valuable ally, providing cover and support. Emily, despite her fear, remained brave and resourceful, helping to tend to the wounded and comforting the other passengers. Cutter used his tactical skills and knowledge of close-quarters combat to his advantage, taking down the remaining mercenaries with ruthless efficiency. He moved quickly and decisively, ensuring that no one was left to pose a threat as they moved through the train. Cutter used the PA system to announce that Volkov had been defeated and that the train was now secured. He instructed the passengers to remain calm and to follow his instructions. That he reached the dining car, where the remaining hostages were gathered. He saw their faces, their expressions of relief and gratitude. He knew that he had done the right thing. He reunited Emily with her father, their embrace a powerful symbol of hope and resilience. He watched them, his heart swelling with emotion. He had saved them. He had kept his promise. With the train secured, Cutter contacted the authorities using the satellite phone, which had miraculously regained its signal. He informed them that the hijacking was over and that the train was safe. He provided them with the location of the train and instructed them to send medical assistance and law enforcement personnel. He then disconnected the call, his work on the Iron Horse finally complete. He took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. He had faced his fears, confronted his demons, and emerged victorious. He had found redemption, not just for himself, but for everyone on board the train. That he had saved the day. That he gathered his belongings, preparing to disembark. He knew that his quiet life was over. He couldn't go back to his self-imposed exile. He had a new purpose, a new mission. That he looked at Emily and Senator Thompson, his eyes filled with gratitude. He knew that he would never forget them, that their courage and resilience would stay with him forever. He turned and walked towards the exit, his head held high. He was John Cutter, and he was ready for whatever the future held. The train slowed to a halt, the screech of metal a welcome sound. The authorities were waiting. The train screeched to a halt, the sudden deceleration throwing the passengers forward. Outside, a cacophony of sirens wailed, growing louder as emergency vehicles converged on the scene. The authorities had arrived. Cutter watched as the first responders swarmed the train, their faces grim and determined. He saw the police officers, the paramedics, the firefighters, all working together to secure the scene and provide assistance to the injured. He knew that his time on the Iron Horse was over. He had done what he needed to do. He had saved the lives of the passengers. He had confronted his demons. He had found a measure of redemption. But he didn't want the attention, the accolades, the recognition. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who had done what was necessary. He looked at Emily, who was standing beside her father, her eyes filled with gratitude. He smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He knew that he had made a difference in her life, that he had shown her that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. He looked at Senator Thompson, who extended his hand in a gesture of gratitude. Cutter shook his hand firmly, his eyes conveying his respect and admiration. That he knew that Thompson was a good man, a man who was dedicated to serving the public. He then turned and walked towards the back of the train. Moving against the flow of the first responders, he blended into the crowd, becoming just another face in the sea of humanity. He reached the rear of the train and quietly disembarked, disappearing into the surrounding countryside. He didn't want to be found. He didn't want to be celebrated. He just wanted to be alone. As he walked away, he looked back at the Iron Horse, its gleaming steel carriages reflecting the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. He saw the passengers disembarking, their faces filled with relief and joy. That he knew that he had made a difference in their lives, that he had given them a second chance. That he had saved them from a terrible fate. He continued walking, his steps purposeful. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know what the future held. But he knew that he was no longer the same man who had boarded the Iron Horse. He had confronted his demons, faced his fears, and found a measure of peace. He had learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. He had learned that even a broken man can find redemption. That he walked into the sunrise, his silhouette disappearing into the horizon. He was John Cutter, and he was finally free. The world would never know his name, but he knew what he had done, and that was enough. That he had found his redemption, not in the eyes of the world, but in the depths of his own soul. The train was still, the sirens faded, and the story of John Cutter, the Ghost who saved the Iron Horse, passed into legend.